Yes. Hi everyone, and nice to see you all in here. My name is Jutta Karjalainen, and today we are going to talk about digital product passport, how to prepare for it, because it's a bit moving target at the moment, but also how to leverage into business value alongside the compliance and regulation behind it. So what we are going to discuss today, we are going to discuss this topic through 3 different points. First, going through what the digital product passport is actually about, what's the regulation behind, what it contains. Next, going into how to actually leverage it as a business value further from the compliance. And then, as the regulation is still a bit of a moving target, how to still start the preparation even though we don't know all of it yet. So my name is Jutta Karjalainen, and I'm a Manufacturing and Automotive Principal from Tietoevry Create. As my work, I help with the sustainability data solutions, especially regarding different regulations, but also beyond that. So for example, ESPR and DPP, what we are going to talk about today, also ESG, CSRD. But alongside that, I'm helping our customers with the digitalization, AI, how to modernize their IT landscape further. My background comes from business process management, low-code, AI, and data, so I have been working alongside with different business processes and thinking about how to enhance those. And as said, I come from Tietoevry Create, so what that means is we are part of bigger Tietoevry group, where we are focusing in creating impact to our customers, creating impact to our customers' competitiveness. And how do we do it is through AI, design, data, and software engineering. We are a global company, around 10,000 persons at the moment. Here you can see where we are working on. And as we are talking about today, sustainability. So as a group, we are also having a lot of targets regarding people and the planet, and that is really important, what we have been also discussing already today in the main stage. But let's regroup what we are going to talk about today. First, what the digital product passport is actually about, how we can leverage the data that we use for the DPP to create further business value, and lastly, how we can already get started, even though the regulation is still evolving. But let's have a bit of gallup first. Please raise your hand if you have heard about digital product passport before. Okay, perhaps around half of the persons. So that's good. You already know a bit of the basics, but we will go those through today. But as the digital product passport is the digital representation of the product, it shows us traceability of it, where it comes from, what kind of materials are used. So how many have thought about before how to improve product traceability, whether it's the product that you are improving at the moment or something that you own, for example, textiles. Has any one of you thought about how you could get more information about your products? Good. And this is what the DPP is actually about. So what it is, it's something that we can create more traceability, more visibility of the background of the product, what it consists of, where it comes from. And the regulation behind this is the Ecodesign for Sustainability Products Regulation, so the ESPR regulation that drives this digital product passport too. And as we have been used to a bit of like doing this kind of a take, make, waste model of products, with the ESPR regulation, we are going to more on the circular economy side. So how we can recycle, reuse, and do better with our products. Starting from how you create the product, how you manufacture it, but also then on the end of life, how you recycle it, how you reuse it. And this is a really important topic and really considers the whole value chain that we are talking about when we manufacture products. So what are the targets for this? So that we can enable and trace the products through its whole value chain. We understand the sustainability impacts, we understand how we can do the circular economy around the product. Thus, we are supporting recycling and repurposing processes, and lastly, ensuring that the sustainability requirements are met. But what kind of products are actually in this regulation, and what comes up? So here are a bit of list of those product areas and product groupings or product types. And as you can see, some of those are actually materials that we make products, for example, iron and steel. And some of these areas are actually in a quite large setting if we think about energy-related products, for example. And what I want also you to know is that behind the ESPR regulation, there are also actually other regulations that drive a bit of similar targets. So that one of those are actually batteries. They have their own regulation, and they need to do their own battery passport. And this is actually the first ones that will be starting in 2027. And a really important part of this, and really exciting stuff coming up. But what is actually the DPP needs, what we need when we are talking about the compliance side of it? So as said, the DPP is the digital representation of the product. And there are actually two types of DPP needed. Some of you who already know about this might know that we are usually talking about the DPP when we are putting the product into service. So when we have the singular product and we have sold it, that needs to have its own DPP, those who are in the regulation. But also we need to have the DPP of the product model or the type when we are putting the product into market. So when you don't yet have the singular product that you have sold, you already need to give information about the product and its origins. What this DPP contains, we will be going that through shortly, a bit of through examples and a bit of through high-level categories. But it has general information which is applicable, I think, for most of the products which were in the list, but also then product type specific information. So what might be relevant to one product type, it could be something related, material compliance or efficiency, etc. For example, the previous Ecodesign regulation is a really good example of that one for the energy-related products. So there you need to already comply with the performance and efficiency metrics that you need to provide to customers and public and authorities. Also, when we talk about DPP, there is a different data layers, and this is from multiple points of view. So first, we have the visibility, different data layers of visibility. Some of the information needs to be public. Some of the needs then restricted access. So for example, only for authorities, customers, maintenance, etc. Then the other part is that you don't need to have all the data just from the singular product. So there is in the regulation also that some information can be model-based, so product type-based. It could be, for example, iPhone 16. Some could be batch-based, so iPhone 16, which was manufactured at that time and at that location, and then some for the actual singular product. So when I reference it, I usually say serial number level product. And then lastly, about static and dynamic data. Most of the DPP contains static data, so that means that when you give it, it doesn't change during the product's life cycle. But then, not perhaps at first, but in the future years, there might be needs for dynamic data. So something that will be updated during the product's life cycle. It might be something, for example, related to how many runs the product still have, etc. But this is something that is already good to take note of. And how you can access the passport is that you need to have in the product or some manuals QR code or something similar so that you can use your phone and just open the information. And lastly, that needs to be interoperable. So you need to do the data as according to the open standard and according to other digital product passports so that you can put those also together. And that is important to note on that there will be standards on how to comply. But what are actually the data behind the DPP? Here are the high-level categories, the first set of those. So first, general product and manufacturer information. So as I said, the demands will be quite similar for all the products. So you need to have some kind of identification of the manufacturer, identification of the product, specifications of that. But then when we go into the performance and technical information, that is usually product type level of thing. So what type of product do you have? And then what kind of information you need. For example, regarding efficiency and performance of the product. Durability, how to use it as long as possible and what to do it with so that you can use the product as long as possible. Then the composition and material information. The basic ones is that you need to be able to show what kind of material composition your product has. Does it have any substance of concern, any critical raw materials? It might be a bit of different specifics based on the product type. But also then what kind of DPPs might be relevant to your product also. So in some of the cases, you might have a really big product that you actually need to put multiple DPPs. So you might have a battery passport, then you have another component which has its own DPP, and it contains the whole product. But then the next set. So this first part in here is something that you might usually think when you think about DPP. So the circularity and environmental information. So how do you showcase that? What is the carbon footprint of the product? What are the recycled contents? What is the renewable content? So how much you can recycle of the product, how much actually in the product materials you have already recycled. And then how to recycle it when the product is actually in the end of life. Then we go a bit of in the more trickier part, and as I said, this is a moving target, so we don't know all yet. So usage information. At least you need to involve this, like what the product consists of, what kind of spare parts, how do you dismantle it, how are the safety measures, so that you can use it as safe as possible and as well as possible. And then lastly, documentation and compliance information. So a bit of standards and compliance information that you usually already have in your products. But what needs to be noted is that you need to have the labels and symbols in the product and also in the digital format so that you can understand it and it is well specified. But I already said in the beginning, this is a really important topic for the whole value chain of your products. So when we think about this, we get the data that I just briefly explained from different parts of the product's life cycle. So we get it from procurement, from other suppliers, from our partners. We get it already from the R&D, possibly engineering phase before manufacturing, and then during usage and end of life. There are a few examples, but what is important also to note that the environmental footprint contains usually all of those parts in the value chain. So you really need to understand the origins of your product, where it comes from, what is included in there. And this you will be sharing through the digital product passport to your customers, authorities, and public parties. So what is the timeline? As said, this is a bit of moving target, so this might not be at the moment accurate if there has been new information. But we are now in 2025, we are starting to get this on rolling. We should get more information already during this month about the prioritization of which products will be affected first. And then at the end of this year, more information of the IT solution behind the DPP from the EU perspective. Also, during next year, the battery passport isn't required yet, but first implementations will start, for example, with some partners. And then starting from 2027, there will be a full-scale adoption in the phases with the DPP, going into 2030 and possibly even beyond that. So, now that we have seen all this information and all this data, this was quite a brief explanation, but how can we leverage this product data further than only the compliance to create business value? So, how we create the value. This is much more than just the compliance when we think about all the product data that we need to actually take into account when we are even building up the compliance metrics. So when we are designing this correctly from the day one, we can use the data and leverage it further as a valuable tool for your business value. So with this, we are already able to collect and utilize product information more efficiently because we need to. We can support more sustainability and circularity parts. We can enable this on how to make even more sustainable products and use the data, for example, for other sustainability regulations together. So really leverage all of this really big exercise further. And what is actually the value? I already a bit of briefly mentioned about it. So how we improve also the product information management through answering the compliance needs, how we build up the data, how we evaluate it, how we bring up the quality in a better way. Also then how we collaborate with our value chain partners. This might be for some companies the first stages on where you need to actually collaborate with them more. You need to know better your supply chain. You need to know what is in there. And then instead of viewing this as a compliance tool, please also take into account the business value, where we can use this data, and I will come back to that a bit later. It could be something regarding business models even, something about servitization, but also just really basic stuff on how to use the data better in your company about your product. And lastly, I think this will be relating more to the B2C community, so how we can get more trusted data to our customers. And about the sustainability regulations, so this is a really good place also to utilize the information further for different regulations from different aspects, or vice versa, collect the information more efficiently. But what I mean when I discuss about with our customers also on how to use the DPP as a stepping stone, how to generate more value. So as you could see, we are really talking about the whole product life cycle, the whole value chain, really a big set of data for one singular product. So we really get to see how the digital thread of the product goes into. We could utilize that quite easily as a stepping stone to generate more data, generate more understanding on different parts of your product's life cycle. And then enable the sustainability actions. So how to make your products more sustainable, but also, for example, how to optimize your products. How to do it lightweight, how to, for example, start to use more advanced manufacturing methods, just as 3D printing. Then for the enhanced service offerings, and this complies or couples together with the multi-use platform development. So how, when you're building the data, when you're building, for example, user interfaces, where else you can use it? And how you could share the information better to your customers, whether it's through digital twin, sustainability stuff, even a bit of notifications to your customers, how to upgrade the product. But really take into this account, and I will share you how do we do it with our customers. But just as a summary, so when we think about DPP data, this is really a similar data that could be utilized for many different use cases and creates a base for multiple different use cases when we are talking about this. We have the ability to build efficient product data governance, and that is a really important aspect that I will be a bit of sharing more information soon. How to actually know where your data comes from, how to think about data lineage, how to think about data management, because that is something that usually lacks a bit of awareness quite often. So who owns the data, where you can get it? And also similarly, this grows a cooperation, for example, through the data governance on how we can share information, how we can collaborate between different functions, how to really understand what the product is, what kind of data comes from it, and how we can uncover the potentials, for example, for service offerings or other types of data areas that we can dive into with the DPP. But yeah, then to the last topic of today, and this is something that I want to spend a bit more time, and that's why I went these first topics a bit faster, because we are talking about both of the topics now more also. So, as you might have already heard from me, the data is really the core for the DPP. The passport is only useful if we actually have the high quality data. It's up to date and it's usable. So that is really the core. And before even thinking about how to show it to users, how to show it to customers, what are the customer journeys that we could do, what are the servitization possibilities, we need to understand the data and how it's built, where we get it, to use it also as a strategic asset. And as I said, even though this is a moving target, how we can start to a bit of prepare, because for at least for the bigger companies, 2027 or even 2030 comes quite quickly if we think about the multitude of products that companies usually have, as we need to think about all the product models, all the product types that we have in our catalogs. And what we can start with is with the general data. We can understand that what kind of data you already have, what is the maturity of it. And then, as said, there are often already challenges in the product data in general. So not even thinking about the DPP as a topic, but just thinking about the product data. There are usually, for example, the governance challenges, but even that, do we have the data, where it's stored, how it's formed. And there might be, for example, a good example is that we have the data, but it's not actually, we cannot find it or we cannot share it. Or it could be that we can identify the manufacturing location, but it's based on these 2 digits of the serial number. And these are something that we already need to or could assess and could find out more, so that we know what is actually this path that we would be taking with the DPP when we are starting to build it, and even before preparing for the DPP as a next step. And even though we don't have all the data points clear for all the product types, those should be coming eventually. But we already have the data points from the battery passport. We already know some of the current regulation information that we have been getting. And that is a really good also starting place, and that gives a lot of insight on the specifics when we go into that. And then how we started now. This is actually objectives that we are using with our customer projects when we are starting with DPP maturity assessments. So a bit of pre-study on where our customer stands at the moment with the DPP. And what we do is we are assessing first the product life cycle. I will be showing next a bit of example of that, but why you actually need to assess the product life cycle first. Thus, you are able to understand how the product is manufactured, what is the business archetype. So then we understand, is it, for example, make to stock? Is it a configurable product? Is it, for example, fully engineered product, so that we don't really know a lot about it before we sell the product? And thus, we will be able to know in which stages of the product life cycle we will get the data from. And then analyze it further, so understand what kind of stakeholders we are going to interview, if we think about concrete steps, and how we are going to form this assessment. Who we interview, what we are going to ask from them, what kind of data they might be involved with. And if you already know the data owners, that is a really good step, but usually, as said, there might be a bit of issues on that. So then we just find out few stakeholders to interview. And then when we understand the product life cycle, actually, so where we get the data, we can start to go to the data analysis phase. This is really analyzing the data, what you already have, and how you could utilize it. What is the maturity? Is it actually accessible? Where it's located? What is the data lineage? So usually we have the data in a lot of different systems, might be in a lot of different databases also. So we need to understand the data lineage. So what is the actual true source of the data? What is the first source of data when we think about some of the data points? Thus, we are able to actually identify the source of the data, if it's modified during the product life cycle, what is the availability, what is the quality, if it even exists. So what is the maturity? And quite often we run into multiple different data sources. It could be even Excel, PDF, anything like that. So not always it is in really good accessible format. And also thinking about the data governance and data management, so how the data is actually managed, who is the owner, what are all those aspects, and that we will find out there. And after those two stages, we actually have a bit of understanding, so what do we have, how it's formed, what is the maturity level, and then it's much more easier to go into this business potential discussion and the business value discussion that I was briefly telling you about just a moment ago. So there, it is much more easier to showcase to the business people that, okay, this is the data you have, this is the data that is needed for the DPP, that is actually the maturity at the moment. These are the stuff that we assume that needs to be taken into action next. But also the really big discussion and the really big question, now that you see the data that what you have, now that you see the data that what is required, what else could be utilized? How you could utilize this data further than just providing the compliance information for the regulation, and where you could utilize it. And that is a really good discussion point, and we usually have workshops with our customers to think about what it is, how it could be utilized. And as said in the few slides back, it could be utilized, for example, for digital twin as a stepping stone for even the product data governance, if that is missing. It could be utilized as a stepping stone for service offerings, to utilize it as a multi-use platform to tell about your customers, about their own products, about how it's running, how it could be utilized better, how to improve it. And that's what I mean, that even though the static data is most of the DPP and the dynamic data might not be needed at first, this is a good thing to understand already now. So if there could be something dynamic data that you could utilize, if you already have, for example, sensors in your product, could you utilize it with this DPP already, or even on top of it, to create better value for your customers? And this is a topic in the manufacturing industry especially, which has been already evident a long time. So servitization, sensors, how to get more information in your product, how to get smarter products. DPP is a good stepping stone, but this might be a discussion points already that you have. And then it's good to align with the business stakeholders on where we stand, what we have, how we could improve it. On top of that, of course, as we are talking about data, we are also talking about IT, we are talking about technical solutions. So now that we understand where the data locates, we understand a bit of your IT landscape, we can evaluate that, do you have the tooling set? Do you have the technological capabilities to build something for the DPP? Quite often, if we think about big organizations which have a lot of stuff already going on, a really large IT landscape, we could quite often utilize something that they already have. Some data platforms, some customer platforms, etc. And a bit of enhance those that then utilize as an asset for the DPP. And that is a really good thing, so that we can bring together the business value on top of the compliance and utilize it even further. And then lastly, the way forward. So based on the results of all those different analyses and the discussions, what are the next steps? What do you need to do? It might not always be the DPP project that we would be thinking about, because that usually takes a lot of effort, that takes a lot of decisions, and that shouldn't even happen perhaps first after this kind of assessment. But what you can actually do to prepare for the project. Perhaps plan the project, but also with the data that you currently have, can you already make it better quality with the tools that you already have? Whether it's linking the product information more for the serial number, whether it's, for example, enhancing some kind of platform that you already use, whether it's building a data platform or starting to do it, or even versioning of the product. And that is something that I want to discuss about in the next slide. So this is what I mean and what I have been talking about when I talk about that you really need to know the product lifecycle as a first step and know the business archetype of your product, so how it goes. So whether it's make-to-stock product, whether it's engineered, whether it's something that you configure, assemble during the product lifecycle before you sell it or when you sell it. And thus we understand better at which points we can generate the data for the DPP, at which point we can start to create the single product DPP already. So usually the product type DPP, so the DPP that you place on the market, you have when you place the product on the market, is something that you really retrieve the information from the R&D and some information that you get from the product procurement, so that you can give the basics information. But then that is a really good asset, especially when we think about make-to-stock products, even the engineered products, that as a reference and baseline of the single product DPP. So how you can actually then can reference into the correct version of the product, can reference in the correct model or batch of the product, and build the single product DPP. So for example, with the make-to-stock products, you would be linking the serial number already when the stock unit has been done. You get the information of the stock unit already from the reference DPP. And then when the product is actually ordered, you might do a bit of assembling on top of it, and then you will fill out those informations needed for the DPP. And even though I say fill out, we of course strive for this to be as automatic as possible, so that you don't need to manually put the information in. And then when the product is actually on use, there might be some service providers that will edit the information as the life cycle goes further. But then also I have mentioned that you need to know in which phases of the product lifecycle you actually get the data, where you might need to update it, even before selling the product, what could be the areas. And here is a few examples of those based on the main categories of the DPP that I briefly mentioned about you earlier. So what you get from the R&D, what you get from the procurement, etc. This view doesn't show it, but also assessing the quality of the data, what kind of data there is actually, what needs to be done, how it relates to the regulation, and do you, for example, update it during the product life cycle. So for example, you have some information on the material composition during R&D, but it might change during the manufacturing. So do you need to update it? Or if in the manufacturing phase there might be something else assembled to the product, so how you update it. And as I said, this is a really big rehearsal for the companies, and this is something that you can already start the preparations and at least know where you stand on the level of maturity at the moment, so what you actually need to do. Not going too much into the technical details, but a bit to understand what kind of building blocks there is for the DPP solution. So as said, there are multiple different data sources that you will collect the data throughout different phases of the product life cycle. And then you actually need to do something about the data. So quite often it's not in a format that would be applicable for the standardization. And there might be some kind of data platform, for example, where you modify it, where you connect it to the correct version of the product, correct reference DPP, etc. And then is the business solution layer or the application layer. So what kind of applications or something else that you will show the data to different stakeholders that are relevant. First, an internal application or some sort of. So how you can steer and modify the data, how you can see the DPP data and make sure that it's reliable, and everything is okay with it, and it's correct for the correct product type, for the correct serial number data. Even do some kind of simulations if we think about utilizing the data further than just for the DPP. Then a public interface for the data that you share when you place the product on market. It could be your own website that you show the product data. And then when we go into the singular product data, so some kind of external user-specific interface. EU will be coming up with something related to it, but especially if you want to scale up and utilize the data for other purposes than just DPP, then some kind of interface that you can restrict the access and also give public information. For example, a customer portal. And also APIs to share the data. So not only this kind of human interfaces, but also machine-readable interfaces. Those are the basic building blocks what we are discussing about when we are talking about DPP. There are some SaaS solutions, of course, on the market, but as you can see, a lot of things are done also behind it on the back end regarding the data so that you can form it also from the technical point of view and have a correct information for the serial number type data. So as a summary, when you start to prepare the data, when you start to prepare the DPP, when you want to build the understanding on where you actually are at the moment with the maturity to answer the needs for the DPP. First, understand the product life cycle that you are assessing about. Then, based on those understandings, analyze your data, its current maturity, its quality, whether it's found or not. Analyze also and assess the data governance behind the product data. So you can already see what is the data lineage, for example, who are the owners, etc. As there is a lot of data from a lot of different data sources, from a lot of different phases of the product life cycle. So that is a really crucial and important step to know who actually owns the data and where you get it from. And from the governance and management perspective, a really big topic. Then, when you have the understanding, seek the value creation possibilities with business. Understand where you could utilize the same data set or a bit of modified data set further for other use cases, for other different purposes. And then you can do the evaluation of IT capabilities already before or after, but you actually need to know what kind of data you have to analyze the IT capabilities to use the potential and optimize the usage of your IT landscape. To understand, do you need to build something more? What do you have? Do you need to acquire something else? And plan the way forward. So as said, it's not something that you might start first build up after the assessment. It might not be that you will build up DPP projects right away, but understand the smaller steps behind it so that it doesn't feel too overwhelming, so that you know what you actually need to do, Whether it's, for example, linking the product information to serial number better, whether it's enhancing the applications or the web pages that you already have, whether it's building a data governance, for example, or do some other technical discussions and decisioning on how to actually build the DPP solution. Those are the summaries. And as said, we are happy to help with you about starting the journey and even building up towards the DPP solution. And we have been doing this with our customers also. And if you want to find a bit more about our roadmap to DPP, please be welcome to scan the QR code, hopefully it still works, and find out our white paper about the DPP topic. I will let you do it in a while. Good. But hey, here I want to thank you so much for coming and joining and listening this topic. This is a really important topic for all the parties that are involved in the DPP area. So understand what the DPP is, think about what kind of business value could be created, and start taking the first steps with understanding the maturity of your situation in regards to DPP. My name is Jutta Karjalainen, and I thank you so much for being here today. Thank you. Questions or anything you want to discuss about? Okay, here is one hand. If you shout a bit and then I will, yeah.
My question would be about repairability.
Yeah.
Because part of the Ecodesign directive is, of course, that it should be possible to repair products, and of course, the product passport regulation doesn't necessarily go to the detail that, but that you should register that. But will you be able to kind of offer repairability data logs? And of course, you do have item of manuals, but also repair manuals and all that.
Yeah. So at the moment, as you said, it might be at first a really deep topic in the DPP itself. So repairability is one part, and that was the question: how the repairability will be and what kind of data. So and there is, as you said, manuals already that needs to be in place, spare part information, dismantling information, but how to repair it. Those are the first step, and of course those will include a lot. But then, of course, the importance is that how to do it, what kind of services could be under that. So we have products that might be, if they go broken, you just toss those away because those are not really expensive, but that shouldn't be the direction. We should go towards on how it could be repaired and what to do with it, really like manuals. And of course also because there needs to be a spare part information and contact information around that. So there could be the service that would be applied. So when you have the spare part information, there could be the contacts on how to repair it and who could repair it. And of course also if we think about the repairability on the data-wise, so if there is something that you repair and the product changes a lot or some information changes a lot, that is something that you need to also edit the information, quite possibly. And there needs to be these service providers, for example, also that can access to the DPP. So that is the part of this kind of authorization also that should be coming more information from the EU side, that how people can update the information during the product life cycle after the actual manufacturer has sold the product. And that is a big part, and not really super clear yet on how it would be done. And we are waiting more information on that, and that should be coming from the EU side at the end of this year. But of course, when we think about really big organizations, you can also build something on your own if you have some kind of maintenance contracts, or even if you, for example, do the maintenance by yourself. And that is something regarding the value chain partnership. That is something that people could take on, organization could take into account. So not only the stuff that happens before you sell the product, but also how you ensure the perfect repairability or as good as repairability as possibility through the service partners. Thank you. Okay.
I was wondering, you mentioned your customers, and I understood that it's mostly original equipment manufacturers, so the one that produce. I was wondering, how do you see instead the actors that already do the repairability, so the remanufacturing, so that are focused only on circularity, like in this DPP picture, how they you have somebody on board already.
Yeah, so who would repair it? Of course, that is something that whether the discussions on whether the repairing is something that you not yet remanufacture the product, so it doesn't become a wholly new product. So then you would update the information, and that is something that you need to understand who are the value chain partners and who could edit the actual DPP. But then, of course, the other part is when you remanufacture the product, and those clients, and that is really tricky part because we have the remanufactured, and then the product is fully new. But also these recyclers and waste handling companies that we are also working with in regards to sustainability data, that how could they then share the data on the waste handling and management. And this is a really important topic that you brought up, because I don't think that is really fully thought about. It's a bit unclear on how much you need to provide the information in the end of life of the product, or if the information is sufficient on how you should do the recycling. But that is a big asset, and I already know that from the recycling and waste perspective, the companies already report this information to their customers so that they can evaluate, for example, the ESG metrics on how much emissions that they are producing through the recycling and waste. But those are the steps that needs to be really thought out on how they could share the data better, and then the remanufacturers. There is also the question that whether they will be the manufacturers of the new DPP, so whether you will need to create the new DPP as they are then the economic operator. And that is more on the legal aspect than, of course, for them to decide and find out. Please. Yeah.
For Sambic Coromant. Regarding material composition, I mean, there might be many cases that this is a secret, right? It's like asking Coca-Cola to put the ingredients in a QR code. How is this handled when it comes to confidentiality or sensitive information? I mean...
Yeah, so what we now see is that it is the shares of the material percentage. So that kind of information, but that is a good question that we also discuss with customers, that when it goes in a way, in the detail, that it's a secret for the company. And that is also the case that when it could be the restricted access for the specific data. But now we see that it is quite, if we think about the EPD documents that the companies might have already, that is quite the level of information that we have now understood that it could be. So then it's according to that. And of course there is now these discussions on, as DPP at the moment, it's quite specific and it's quite a lot. So as you might see already from the ESG and CSRD perspective, there might be, and there are discussions on what is actually the importance of the information level, so that those can be avoided. And there are working groups on discussing about that what is actually the correct level. So that, because we know that, and they also know that there is a lot of this kind of secrets that you don't really...
It can be good or bad as well, because
you
can also avoid, you can verify that it's actually not a copy, for example, so it works also the other way around, but just curious about this detail level.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. And also, for example, if we think about technical details, there needs to be these engineering drawings, some sort of, so that is also this kind of topic of discussion that goes in the really much details if we think about CAD drawings quite soon. So that is something that might not be that you want to actually share with the public. And that I don't have full answer at the moment, sorry about that, but it's in a discussion on what it should be the level of detail. And it's a good thing that we have the DPP has the possibility of some data can be restricted, so you don't need to show in a full extent to the public. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, so it's now time to wrap up. Thank you, Satu. I will be in here. We have the Tietoevry booth up there, so I will be going there. And of course, if you have something that you want to discuss straight away, please feel welcome to do so. And also after this, in the mingle sessions, also come and say hi. It was super nice to discuss with you. Good that you had questions. Happy to discuss about this more even today. Thank you so much.